Welcome to today's video where we're looking at the single most important Seiko watch ever. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, yes, this is my 1966 Seiko 62 Mas. Now, why is this watch so important? Well, to really understand the importance of this watch, we need to look at a whole bunch of watches that come after this watch. So let's start putting them here. We've got the 62 Mas, we've got the 6217, you've got chronograph, you've got this in the right orientation, you've got a turtle, you've got a world timer, you've got a landmaster here, you've got a quartz diver, of course you've got an alpinist, if I can find the space for it somewhere, and obviously, there's the modern generation of the 62 Mas. We've got the... Oh, man. These will all drop. There's too many watches on this table. You've got a SPB 147. And you've obviously got the SLA 043. So, a lot of watches to understand one simple watch. Let's pause this and get this out of here, and while I get this out of here, please be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber. If you're already a subscriber, thank you very much and enjoy this video. So let's get these watches out of here. Just too many watches. Well, actually we should work with the alpinist. So while I have the alpinist here, this comes out in 1992. This is the same design as the red alpinist. And if you look at the original alpinist, that is from the early 60s, this is Seiko's first sport watch. And while Seiko is making sport watches like this, it's also making high-end watches like the King Seiko that I have here and my Grand Seiko. This is the 57. And the predecessor to the 57 was the 62. And now remember that number, 62, the caliber 62. These are the caliber 56 and 57. 57 is manual. 56 I think is automatic. But the major change that you see is none of these watches. The first Seiko Alpinist is essentially a dress watch that has sports watch stops, and the Seiko 62 MAS or the 62 Mas, let's bring that to the fore, is the very first Seiko sports dive watch ever. This is the watch that establishes Seiko as a powerhouse in sports watches and really the world's most important dive watch manufacturer. If you were diving in the 1960s, from the late 60s, you were really only using Seiko watches. Nobody was really using submariners to dive. The only place you would see a submariner diving was on the pages of National Geographic, or unless you were sponsored by Rolex, as say, some people like Jacques Cousteau and all of them. So, the full name of this movement is the Seiko 62 MAS 010. The MAS comes from its full name, that is the Seiko-matic self-dater. Now understand, a lot of these early Seiko watches contain the name Seiko-matic because they were really automatic watches. And the self-dater, was because this had a self-dating capacity. So, and please understand, the Rolex Submariner only comes out in 1965 with a date model, and it had no quick set capability, unlike this 62 mass, which has that very nice quick date capability. Now, 62 obviously, because of the caliber that this is using, the 62 caliber, which is the same as the first Grand Seiko chronometer, which is also using the 62 caliber, also the same as the Seiko World Timer, which is also using the 62 caliber. So the 62 caliber Seiko is a fairly common movement. It starts out in 1964 in the main Seiko line as the World Timer that's released to celebrate commemorate the Olympics in Tokyo. And it's not a fancy movement. It's got only 17 jewels. But it's a very, very good movement in terms of longevity. Anybody who has a 62 movement like my chronograph, my World Timer here, or my 62 Grand Seikos, they just work so well. Now, what made this watch exceptional? 150 meters water resistance. Mind you, this does not have a screw down crown. Let's see if we can focus on this. So you cannot screw the crown down, and the bezel, like the early Seiko watches, is rotating in bidirectional. It's not a unidirectional bezel like the later watches. In fact, the 6217, which follows this with the tonneau case, is also a bidirectional bezel. Bidirectional bezels are actually great if you want to use the watch as a timer, because you can really set the time to follow the minute hand wherever it is. And if you are a modern day Seiko enthusiast, you would not have to deal with the dreaded bezel alignment issues, even though each and every one of my Seiko watch has really perfect bezel alignment. So, Seiko's first dive watch ever. There are two versions of this watch. You have in 1965, they come out with what is called the small crown. But if anybody has tried rotating, say, the crown on this Seiko, a small crown on this Seiko Alpinist, you would realize it's a pain to rotate. It's just so hard to rotate, and especially if you're wearing gloves, you just can't rotate it. I have the same problem with any of my other watches with a small crown. So in 1966, they introduced a model with the large crown. So the 62 MAS comes in two variants. Small crown comes out only in 1965, and from 66 to 67, the large crown movement. It is a signed crown movement, and it has this beautiful flat edge that is such a classic look. Now, originally this came with tropic straps, as really every Seiko watch in the 1960s would come. You can see that's my original tropic strap from 1968. And till 67, well, really through 66, let's open this up a bit. Through 66, they have this watch with its famous porpoise case back. Of course, later on in the last year of its production in 68, 67, they moved to the horseshoe case back. And so you will see versions of this. If it is from 67, they're using either the porpoise or the horseshoe. Obviously, it is a waterproof watch, because even till 1968, Seiko was advertising its watches as waterproof. They definitely were not waterproof. And that's why its lack of its screw down crown meant you will see corrosion in almost every version of a 62 mass. My watch is a really exceptional watch, because normally these watches are extremely beat up. What often happens is the etching on the crown wears out. So in fact, if I were to compare it to, say, my Alpinist, you would realize in my Alpinist, you can't even read anything on the crown. I mean, you can barely see the, I wonder if you can see it. There is the mountain logo. Nah, you really can't see it. I mean, I can see it under a specific light. For most 62 mass watches, the back is really worn out, and that's normal. This one, it isn't. That's what makes it such an exceptional watch. The other thing about this watch, it just got serviced. It never really got serviced before that, so it works absolutely fine. Or if it did get serviced, there are no service marks on inside. A lot of these watches were bought by US servicemen in Vietnam, so that's how these watches come to America. The bezel is obviously aluminum with, and the paint does wear off. So this again is in very good shape to get a bezel in that condition. There is corrosion, and I actually like corrosion in this watch, so I'm not complaining about corrosion. Now it's rare to, and this obviously goes well, 19mm strap, goes well with really any strap. I have it on my NATO strap just because I have its successors on NATO straps, so I thought they just look good right next to each other. This watch, in terms of cost, nowadays a watch like this would easily cost you $5,000 or more, especially a watch that's in as great shape as this. Why $5,000? You have only one reason to blame, and that is the SLA range that Seiko announced in 2015, I think 2015, to celebrate 60 years of this watch, 65 years. Well, anyway, so when this watch comes out, the SLA series, and then followed by the much more affordable SPB series, this watch was, a $6,000 watch. This was not ever a $6,000 watch. This was a $100 watch back in the 1960s, early mid-60s, which in present day money is not a cheap watch. A $100 watch in 1965 is about $700 in today's money. But that is nothing close to the amount of money that is charged for this SLA. But this really, mind you, is a Grand Seiko. This is not a Grand Seiko. In fact, if you compare, you would realize the finish on these watches is completely different in quality. But, so before 2015, these watches were still fairly affordable. You could get them on the used market for about $800,000. But moment this watch came onto the market, the SLA 043 or the 017, 037, the whole range, the 62 mass just shot up in value. So now it's very hard to get watches like this because collectors just hang on to their watch. They will not sell this watch anymore because they just know it's like the original Submariner. A Submariner from 1955, wow, that's going to be $30,000, $40,000. That's a lot of money. This watch I don't think will ever become that expensive, but yes, I expect in 5-10 years this will cross more than $10,000 because they just don't make them anymore. Anyway, this is turning out to be a much longer video than I was going to talk about. I really didn't get around to talking much about the watch, so I'm going to end it here, and I'll probably upload a couple more videos. Thank you for staying and watching this video. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please be sure to watch my other videos, and I will see you on another video.